I wish more teachers took risks. Try different things, take more risks, and I think that goes just right across the board. You have to be mission aligned. You really do have to take the time to understand what's happening in the province. But I think Canadian EdTech needs a shot in the arm, and I think it needs some serious focus at all levels of government.
All right, everybody, welcome to the next episode of the LearnIt Podcast. I'm really, really excited to have you joining us today, Jason. I've spent a lot of time talking to Jason behind the scenes, on the phone calls behind the scenes, and he's an incredible person. So I'm really, really happy that you're here sharing your insights, not only with me selfishly, but with the rest of the crew today.
I love it. Let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll start with the question that's always most consistent, as folks know. And our first question, always the same across all the guests, is about your childhood. So I'd love for you to take us back to sort of, your childhood. What would your parents, your teachers, people around you have said about you as a child growing up? And do you feel like you still carry some of those things today?
Almost all of those things are still the same today. Yeah. And that would be very energetic kid. My grandmother used to tell me I wish I could just, tape you to the chair because she said I was just high energy all the time. I had a great childhood. I mean, really early on, I had all 4 loving Italian grandparents. I don't know if you've spent much time with the Italian Canadian community, but I don't think there's any love like a grandparent's love. And I was lucky enough to have them well into my late teens and early 20s with my one grandmother. But yeah, I loved being outside. To me, the bike was a ticket to freedom. Just riding all through the suburbs with friends, making new friends. And I just remember this really uplifting feeling of my parents are giving me the the freedom to roam and the responsibility. And so it was a ticket to freedom. Other things about kind of how I grew up was very much in an immigrant household. Those grandparents literally didn't speak any English whatsoever. Wow. So it was a double language household. Italian was really my first language growing up. And then, just this really working class experience. My grandparents were farmers, masons, seamstresses, and factory workers. And, so I'm the first generation born here, but not the first generation to go to university, because that was the emphasis for both sides of my mom's family and my dad's. Is they made all the sacrifices for you to go to school. My paternal grandmother in particular loved reading. She had grade 6 education, but she read Dante in Italian. Dante's can you imagine someone today with a grade 6 education saying, I'm going to go read Shakespeare? Yeah, exactly. Right? So she told me, she was the one to live the longest. So I knew her and actually lived with her for a few years. And I knew her quite well. And she would tell me how she cried every day when she graduated grade 6 and the school was too far and they were too poor to go to it. So that's kind of the context of what the family dynamic was and how I grew up.
Yeah. No, high energy. I mean, I think I was similar in that sense. I used to be a lot of energy in me. Did you cause a lot of trouble at school?
No, I was pretty good. I mean, I definitely got into some crazy stuff with my friends. We still tell some of the stories of the absolute crazy things we did. But no, I mean, I always liked school. I got bored often. So that's when, actually a nice little anecdote will tell you exactly what it was like for me in school. Is I go to my kids' parent-teacher interviews now, and my son is actually just in a couple weeks turning 12. Okay. And for the last 3 years in particular, I've told his teacher, if we go back 30 years and you replace me with my father, you're telling me the exact same things my teachers told my parents. Yeah. Which is he does his work. He's completing the work fast. He gets it. He's bright in this, that, and the other.
Especially at you.
But then he just talks and he disrupts and he wants to and it's that's what it was like for me too. So I mean, I think as I got older and I found courses and subject areas I loved, I was immersed into those classes and was a pretty good student. I learned how to learn at the end of high school going into university pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, I think I started to get a very strong sense of my learning ability towards the end of my high school, my last 3 years or so. Yeah. Before that, I was I used to get my stuff done. I would be a good student, good grades and everything, but I just disrupted more than an average student, right? So I was a little bit more louder, a little bit more excited and all that sort of things, which, I think I can definitely imagine a smaller version of Jason running around school.
Yeah, and in a lot of the interviews I've done with folks, I love these questions, the background, how we grew up, because I think there's something. I'm a little bit older than you. We won't figure out exactly how much, but like there's something between my generation, say people in their early 40s, and say down to their early 30s, but then after that, social media, gadgets come into the childhood in a significant way. And so there's a big difference. And a lot of my guests have been people even older than me that they've had this really, great, let's call it Generation X upbringing, which is bikes and freedom, a lot of outdoor time, a lot of figuring it out time. And there's a lot of things that weren't great about how we grew up too, in terms of like, a whole slew of things. But in terms of the freedom and the ability for parents not to overly worry about us, maybe they should have worried about us a little bit more in terms of where we were going and what we were doing, especially in those high school years. But I think overall it's a very healthy upbringing. I think it's good that there's record of this for future generations, or even folks a little bit younger than you that would have been, had different experiences, and they're going to be becoming parents soon and raising their own kids. So these kind of experiences are important to convey to other folks.
Yeah, I get to learn a lot. Yeah. And like a lot of different people, you are an individual that has come from a background, a family of education, right? We're talking behind the scenes, your sisters, your brother, yourself. Like, I personally haven't seen a guest that has come with so many educators around him. Yeah. And I am curious to know sort of how that might have like, was there some sort of innate pressure to be in education? Was it just like somehow naturally one way everybody just wanted to be in that space? What was that like growing up?
So absolutely not. Like pressure to become educators, no. But pressure to be, so not even pressure to be good students, pressure to learn. You go to school to learn how to think. You figure out your job. They never, do you want to do that? My dad used to, this was his famous line. You can do any job you want. He said, there's honor in being a garbage collector. He goes, but you go to university first, you learn to think. And if that's your decision, that's your decision. There's honor in middle class work, in everyday work. And that was the overriding message. Now, the calling, we were joking just off cameras about my brother is the last one to venture into teaching, and now as part of the SHISM program too, he's teaching sustainability, and so it's complete now. All six of us have now legit education experience. Now, of course, what my brother and I do is quite different, right? Like my running joke was that, I come from a family of educators, and I'm the black sheep that went into education technology, right? And now my brother as well. So both sisters, one a high school teacher and librarian, another one an elementary school teacher, and after close to a 30-year career, she just changed it up as now a phys ed teacher for her school here in TDSB just down the road. My mom was an elementary school teacher in Peel. I know you've interviewed folks from Peel, so I spent a lot of time on my PD days and PA days with her in Peel at Corliss Public School. And then my father's a university professor. So the other part of my experience was growing up on York University campus. I ended up going there and getting 2 degrees there. But for me, I get very sentimental when I'm there because
it's like nostalgia.
But I grew up there. I went to daycare there.
Yeah. Oh, you grew
up there, literally daycare there. And then 2 degrees there, and my father teaching there. It was a little weird, especially in those university days. You meet a beautiful young lady, and you're having a coffee, and out of nowhere, your dad shows up. And then he's like, "You want? You want $10 for lunch?" I'm like, go away. I'm having a moment. But now, and even then, I appreciated how unique of an experience that was.
I mean, I went to UBC, and even every time I go back to even my school back in Uganda, it's like there's just some sort of feeling that you get that I don't even think you can quite explain it. It's this feeling of like a rush of memories coming back. You remember those things that you used to sit on the bench over there and do these things, or you used to do that, and it's crazy how much of an influence it can have. And the longer the time you wait, the more that nostalgia builds up, and it's a beautiful feeling in its own way.
I think going back to that point that my grandmother really instilled in me, learning is beautiful, and this is learn it, right? You guys are about that, and same with the podcast. I want people to appreciate learning for itself, not for another end, right? It's not a means to an end. It's
an experience.
It's an experience, and it's a means to a good life.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm hoping we're moving to a society that we have actually less of a barrier or less of a distinction between education and work. And I think the future of work is actually going to be much more closely related to the future of education than it has been. It's kind of been like you graduate and you go into the real world, which I've always kind of hated. Like, I understand the idea behind it, but there's a lot of more real things that happen in a philosophy class that happen in any meta office ever.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that.
Absolutely. No, 100%. And you have been sort of in the industry for a long time now. Was there one moment in your career or one moment that you fondly remember that you feel has really shaped the way that you approach things, the way that you think about things in education?
Yes, several. But if I had to identify one, would probably be my general experience when I got the job with Discovery Education. I kind of say it was one of the great privileges of my career and life, because the folks at Discovery Education, still a bunch of great folks, but even then, 10 years ago, was in a really interesting spot, especially the Canadian entity of Discovery in relationship to the rest of the organization, right? We were given a lot of actual freedom, and kudos to actually one of my guests, Andy Schaefer, who I always will sing his praises for being such a good human being and teaching me how to work in K-12, because I came from higher ed, but gave me a lot of freedom to figure out the role of Discovery Education in Canada. And so, in effect, I got a passport to travel all across the country, meet educators, meet superintendents, and I did that for a better part of 7 years. And I learned in a real hands-on kind of way what the Canadian education system is like. And I realized while doing it that I thought, I always thought maybe a CEO of another company would get these experiences, but CEOs go across the country, but then they don't actually do the work because they're busy being a CEO. But I'd worked on implementations all across the country, right? And I actually started some of this work when I worked with Nelson as a publisher. I would go to Newfoundland, and I would go to PI. I had university and college clients out there. So I got to see not only the education system, but the disposition of the people all across Canada. And as you can tell by how I describe it, still one of my
most fondest,
fondest memories, and I'm actually trying to replicate in a lot of the work I do today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, one of the things that I really want to get your perspective on that I'm sure a lot of our guests will also appreciate is you've also worked, when you talk about geographic regions, you've worked in the United States and you've worked in Canada, and you've worked with educational institutions on both sides of the world. Not both sides of the world really close to each other, but both areas, both geographic regions. And a lot of the times when I talk to entrepreneurs and people in education, they always talk about this idea of starting in Canada and expanding to the US. Maybe because Canadian schools or school boards are harder to get into sometimes than the US side of it.
Yeah.
What's your perspective on the similarities and differences, and what would you suggest in terms of an approach? Like, how should people think about their approach to the US versus Canadian schools and school boards?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually don't think the approach should be fundamentally different. There are definitely some things, like if you're talking about the EdTech world, right? There are some, quite different pathways and processes in the two countries, and really state by state and province by province.
Yeah.
My general recommendation for folks is, and I've had some great people articulate this to me, like great superintendents, that emphasize every time, and it's super important to understand this. It's harder to do it in practical reality, but that you have to be mission aligned. You really do have to take the time to understand what's happening in the province, what's happening at the district level, what is happening at the individual school levels, right? So some of my greatest learning and greatest successes is realizing that within a district, take Surrey where I did this, within Surrey, you have the superintendents and their goals. You have the training they're doing for principals. You have the training they're doing for teachers, and a new curriculum coming in. That's when I was working there. And oftentimes the superintendent doesn't have all the details they need, all the feedback they need from the teachers. So I realized I started closing these loops, communication loops and understanding of their own districts for them. And what that really makes you understand when they say it's about the mission, it's about moving the collective project of public education forward. So it's not about the individual EdTech tool. I know as a founder, you have to be obsessed. You have to be obsessed. Like if you're doing literacy and you're doing a digital literacy tool, you have to be obsessed of trying to figure that out. But my recommendation is US or Canada. I'll come back quickly to the differences and similarities. But the number one thing that you have to do as a founder is work through the districts. And it's hard because like they're so different, the regions, but so many pockets. But I think if you're mission aligned, that's how you bring this commonality. So if you're doing, you're creating a literacy resource, let's say, then you have to be the biggest geek on literacy and you have to love it. And you have to be able to obsessed with it to the point where when you walk into a district, you find your people. Like, who's your literacy geek? Yeah. You and I are going to geek out. Yeah. And now you can understand their world and how it overlaps with your world. And then you together help educate the administrators who need to implement this tool, right? Yeah. Because I think we think it's like, everyone thinks they have the solution. I've said this often. You can literally have, right now, you can say, Jay, I got the best EdTech app. It's actually figured out the panacea of like how we learn. This will do a diagnostic, tell you how you learn, tell you the exact moment of the week that this kid needs the intervention. Yeah. Like, it can legitimately, let's assume it's the magic pill.
Magic, yeah.
Yeah, right? It would still be difficult to implement in a district. Even if you said, like, just take it, just the pill will make everyone smarter, like no side, no negative benefit. It would still have to go through a process.
Yeah.
That involves human beings that if you catch them in the morning and they're hungry are going to give you a negative response. I don't have time for this, right? Yeah. So you still have to go through an administrative process that is both annoying and cumbersome, but by and large necessary to create robust public schools, which brings me to the answer about the main differences between the Canadians and the Americans. So there are fantastic public schools in the US. Fantastic. Some of the best I've ever seen. You would go in there and your jaw would drop. But I've also seen some of some schools in the most need that I've ever seen. Like, I've been to Chicago public schools, and their issues, how do I get the kids to the school safely?
That's a whole different world. It's not about like, what app should we implement?
Well, app.
How do you get them safely?
Right, like teacher qualifications. Like, how do you get teachers to teach in those areas? And there are amazing people that I would pin the Presidential Medal of Honor on for their dedication to students. And those stories are found everywhere. But what we've done in Canada, despite not having a federal body of education, is have a very robust public education system where the floor, so those that are the most in need, have as good as a shot as the best students in the wealthiest areas. Now, are there improvements that need to be made? Of course. Every district will tell you, we want to improve A, B, C, and D, right? Work especially around marginalized communities, indigenous communities. And they are on their way to improving that, and they're aware of it. But we are working towards it. So what I always say is, what Canada does better is equity. Is it perfect? No superintendent, director of education will tell you they're happy with their progress, but it's a constant focus. And we have, to the EdTech point, I think, created a system that has created as fair a playing ground as you can in a population like ours, as diverse as ours. So a lot of conversations I've been having recently on the podcast and in private, I mean, even they've been going on for a while, is Canada is, a kind of envy of the world. And we don't tell this story well enough. And that's really the one thing behind my podcast was, yes, I talk to Americans and different folks, but to get a gauge on Canadian education and to get a better understanding of where we are. And people from all over the world want to understand, how are we doing such a good job when, you mentioned your background. I mentioned my immigrant background. Like, here we are, children of immigrants and immigrants. My wife wasn't born in this country.
Yeah.
And they want to know, how are you integrating them so well? Now, seamlessly, maybe not, because we have our issues, but
relative to other places, I think that
relatively. And the other thing that I point out always is, it's not only about the education system, it's our culture. And we don't look at this enough. Like, the Canadian assemblage of different people has a lot to do, of course, with the indigenous people, but also the French. Like, a lot of us, I think this was before our time, before my time even, where there was a big rivalry. I think it still exists between, Francophone Canada and Anglophone Canada. And I think the hard fought and hard won battles of identity over those years that are kind of were left open for the country to figure out is very different than the American identity.
Sure.
And so I think you have to actually look back at, creation of Canada, the vision of what Canada can be as this incomplete project that we keep attempting to get right. But Canada itself is that project that we always want to attempt. And there is strains of this in the American culture, and we've learned from that. But there's a wonderful book by a former professor of mine called A Canada of Light. And it's a beautiful book about exactly this. I've learned all this through the book, about this this vision of Canada that is incomplete yet reaching to be better all the time. And I think our schools actually reflect a lot of that. And I just want folks to understand that and to bring it to the top of mind when we're having these conversations.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. And I think that, sometimes just because of what we hear from people or what we see around from people, it's very easy to discount. And I think people that I've interacted with, sometimes they have a negative perception towards Canadian education or Canadian technology in education specifically, and their ability to innovate and their ability to grasp that. And, the more I speak to people in positions that make those decisions, the more I get to understand it. And I think it's really hard to understand especially I do think that it is complicated. Our Canadian education system isn't as...
It's always the first thing I tell everyone. Yeah. It's more complicated than you think.
It's more complicated. And, and the more you think you know, the more, the
more learning you got to do.
You got to do, right? So I think that the more these conversations surface, then the appreciation for that definitely builds up. No, for sure.
I would say on the tech side, though, there is some strong elements of truth to that. I think we can do better as a nation with our EdTech, and I think we have to, right? Like this is an important point. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah.
And I mean, I worked for an American company, and it was a great company, and they did a lot of great things with Canadian educators. And I don't think we should stop that. I think when there's good tools from around the world, we should think about how we adopt them, how we learn from them, how we pressure them to adopt us. But I think Canadian ed tech needs a shot in the arm, and I think it needs some serious focus at all levels of government. So provincially, from the provincial bodies of education, but I think there needs to be a real focus on how we develop this industry in Canada for all the reasons that we're seeing now with how, one of our greatest allies, it's kind of like a brother turning on you, and that it's going to have long-lasting implications. And so we have to think about how we fortify our identity. And for me, we fortify our identity through education. And even if it's a porous and flexible identity, I actually would encourage that. That's what I was talking about a moment ago, right? But we have to fortify that ability to explore identities, that ability to move off positions, move off stringent identity politics, right? We're always going to have our identity, right? As an Italian Canadian, right? As, people from all various backgrounds. That's one beauty of Canada. My grandparents were able to live here, never speak the language, but love being Canadian, right? Americans, they lose the language much quicker than us because of this pressure, right? So, again, that's one example, but I do think, to wrap this point up about EdTech, I do think we need to focus on it as an industry of relevance, not only for jobs, but of course for that, but more in particular for what it means to be Canadian and what it means to educate ourselves by ourselves.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I mean, I do think that, I love your point that I think that there's some sort of pride in being Canadian that I have seen that always comes through when individuals speak about coming from Canada or being Canadian. I think that that's very inherent, in our culture.
Yeah, I think sometimes we take it for granted.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because it is good. Like Canada's, despite the winter that we're slowly getting out of now, it's a good side. It's the best place in the world to live.
Yeah, and for a lot of entrepreneurs that want to build an education company, and they really, really have this strong passion. Because I always tell people, education is a passion-driven industry. Yeah. It is not driven by anything else. It's driven by pure passion and obsession. Yeah. That's why if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful in the industry because everyone else does. Yeah. What advice would you have to those founders that are trying to break into the market, that are trying to think about building an education tool for Canadian students?
Yeah. When I give this advice, I'm worried it sounds impossible to them, but it just needs to be done incrementally and over time. And that's, you have to understand pedagogy. I'm saying if you're in the learning sphere, right? If you're doing a student information system, no. Like you probably need to understand how the mechanics of a school district work currently and maybe should work in a more optimal setting. I mean, I bet you can even make an argument that even they should understand how pedagogy works. But I think you have to become as close to an expert as you can individually, like D-Raj can individually become, or Jason can become, around learning. So substitute pedagogy and learning, right? You have to know as much as you can about how an individual human learns.
Yeah, how our generation right now learns. That's very different.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of differences. I think there's lots of similarities, right? And probably where those two rub up against each other is where you want to be. But I use literacy as an example. Obviously the work that you guys do, like you have to know how to bring areas of expertise like business and, say media production or something like this to teachers that don't have that background, or to districts that don't have that background. That's why the SHISM program, what you guys do, is friggin' awesome, right? Like that stuff is important. But say you are an AI company, right? And say, you're doing AI games for kids around education. Like, you can spend all the time in the world building the most addictive app.
Yeah.
But that's not learning.
Yeah.
Right. And don't get me wrong. It could be like a better app than YouTube, or like, something that I'd rather my kids spend time on better than these other ones. But that doesn't make it a great learning tool.
Yeah.
Right.
I see what you're saying. So focusing on the intention of, and knowing that sort of trying to become as much of an expert as possible in this area of pedagogy, and trying to understand how people learn today, and how what you're creating aligns with that, and not necessarily just like another product in the mix. Right?
And then how the vision of learning is for the district and for the province, and then for the neighboring province, right? And then to me, and anyone that's ever talked to me longer than 10 minutes and knows I'm going to bring up Marshall McLuhan at some point, right? But very influential Canadian thinker.
We were just at the school.
Oh yeah, that's my old stomping ground. Yeah, I used to live right there. Yeah, awesome. Actually, let me come visit just because of the namesake. And just for reference for this audience, I interviewed Andrew McLuhan, who is Marshall McLuhan's grandson.
Wow.
I worked with Eric McLuhan, who is Marshall McLuhan's son. But check out their work, and check out the work Andrew's doing in preserving his family's legacy. It's important for that Canadian identity piece. But why I was bringing Marshall McLuhan up was because, he gave us some guidelines on how to think about technology and learning and the brain, and reading on an iPad over long periods of time is not the same as reading from paper. Like
writing,
it's just not. There are different effects on your brain. You can argue the merits right, but I want that argument to take place. It's a good discussion to have. So what I would say and this is hard for the tech community to understand, because they all get measured now on time, on like how many logins, daily usage, clicks, all that stuff is how you build a unicorn, which is what every founder wants to. And for me, I don't think you can work education like that. It has been way too influenced by Silicon Valley and attention-grabbing apps. They often want to include, deflate or conflate, I should say, engagement with logins and things like that. Engagement is legit. If you get kids engaged, learning happens. But clicks
doesn't mean that they're actually engaged.
100%.
Right? But we associate those together because that's the metric that the VCs want to look at.
There it is.
It's how many logins, what's the click-through,
There it is. And so if I could be the main VC for learning, like I'm going to take 10 bets and I need one of them to come through. Right? That one that I want to come through is the one that I want to change learning away from devices. Wow. So it's hard, right? But it's not impossible. Like Discovery back in the day, they had a great content library, and they had really smart people. Karen Beer was one of them that I interviewed, who really, Karen Beer was like a literacy expert, but also a professional learning expert. So we built all these experiences about how you use tech to inspire the lesson, go on here, get your content, but then do something hands-on over here. The teacher now has the ability to work with this group on literacy over here. And then that group on math is doing another printed out activity where they're reading and they're writing on paper, right? So this kind of more dynamic classroom is what every single EdTech entrepreneur should aspire to. Because if we have 100 of them trying to figure it out and one succeeds, that's all we need.
I like that. That's a very nice way of putting it. I haven't heard that one before.
A little different.
All right, we're going to shift gears into a rapid fire round. So I'll shoot you a question. Under a minute, you can respond.
I don't know if I can keep it to under a minute.
Rapid fire. All right. I'll try. What's your go-to productivity hack?
So my go-to productivity hack, another different answer. I don't know if you're gonna like this.
Tell me. Yeah.
It's you gotta work with good people. The people I work with.
I don't know that before. Yeah.
No, because everyone wants. I the people I work with know that I they don't have the best system in terms of like using all these digital tools. Of course, the typical ones are all there. Of course, generative AI right now helps with a ton of what I'm doing, even just as a thinking partner. So if I had to say a tool of that, but really productivity hack, find good people, work with good people. You'll go further that way.
Yeah, people make everything.
That's right,
and they always will. Yeah.
That's right.
What's one part of your daily routine that you can't skip?
Working out. I mean, I do skip it because life happens, but I won't skip it. Like I have a certain amount, like I want to do 4 days.
Your brain will be like, no, dude, go right now.
My brain.
It happens to me too.
Or more importantly, my wife will say to me, what your energy right now is not that great. Go for a run. Or go lift some weights.
Running is your way too.
Lifting and running. Like I said, I'm getting older than you, so the body is.
You don't look it. Yeah.
No, I'm trying not. The body's barking at me more now, but yeah, for sure. Exercise in some form, playing sports. Like I play soccer still, and
nice.
So yeah, any different ways to get moving.
Love it. What's one thing that not many people know about you?
I mean, I've said it, like the one I like to freak people out is like I've worked in every single province in education, so that's kind of one that catches people by surprise. One that you won't know about me is I'm a black belt in Taekwondo.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I can't tell that's a threat. Or... that's more
no, it depends.
Depends on the situation.
I'm also Sicilian, so that's more of the threat than the black belt.
I'll be safe. Love it. What was your favorite subject in school when you were a student, and what was your least favorite?
My favorite, so I as a young kid, I liked everything. It all depended on the lesson, right? Like I remember loving geometry. I just loved, the fact that you could calculate all these different aspects of shapes and they had all this different relationship to your life. But certainly the love of my life came in high school when I studied history, literature, and then for sure, philosophy. One of my side quests in life is to get a philosophy course taught in every single high school. I think with AI now, I've got a great argument or better argument for people to understand why it's necessary. To me, thinking about ideas, loving ideas, to me,
you're a deep person, I could tell.
It depends on the day. There's definitely days when I'm not, but I just love ideas. So that would be the number one subject.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
And if you weren't in education, what would you be doing?
This is a hard question. I have no idea. I mean, part of what
philosophy, some of the philosophy.
Still time for that to just roam around and teach people in the streets. But philosophy was always teaching. It was always connected with teaching, right? So to me, there really is, philosophy. The etymology, the origin of the word, is love of knowledge, right? So it's people have this image of old white guys in togas with beards. But philosophy's happened all over the world. Like the Eastern traditions are powerful, as well as the Western traditions. And it's the same thing as people, I guess, kind of like me and my dad and my brother, that just, love talking about complex ideas, and love learning from people. So, philosophy.
Yeah, no, I love it. And the last question on the rapid fire, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received or given to someone?
I don't know how much advice I give people. I know they definitely don't listen to it. So I would say, I think I mentioned it already, but I'll just put a sharp point on it. That advice my father gave me when in 1999, I'm applying for university, more or less, 99, 2000. I think it was 2000. I had no idea what I was going to do. I know there were a lot of things I didn't want to do, but I had no idea what I was going to do. And my dad said, just learn to think and the job will figure itself out. And it's always been true. If you learn, and not saying the thinking's perfect by any stretch, right? But you learn how your brain operates, you learn how you learn, and then you learn to appreciate and think about what a good life is about. Then I think because we live in a society where, like, look what you're doing. You figure it out. Right? I figured, and I think, if I give advice to people watching this, I'll look directly in the camera for this. If I can give advice, take risks. The EdTech community that watches will know that. They're all, but I wish
nothing good comes without risk.
I wish more teachers took risks.
Yeah.
Like my sisters, God bless them, they're beautiful. Maya, Sarah, I love you, but they don't take risks.
Yeah.
Because they're good teachers that say, well, my board says I can't do this.
Yeah.
Or my principal, but I'm like, what I tell them is that you have the most powerful unions maybe in the history of unions. No one's going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, this learning outcome, you didn't get that one.
Yeah.
So try different things, take more risks, and I think that goes just right across the board.
Yeah, I love that. All right, we're going to go to what we call the final question.
Okay.
Over here we have a question that's left from one of our previous guests.
Yeah.
And then we'll get you to leave a question for one of our upcoming guests.
Okay, cool.
All right, let's see. And I haven't read these, so I read them with you.
Oh, you do them right at live on the spot. I love that.
They have a good handwriting, because otherwise it puts me in a difficult position. All right. This question is from Tracy Fosher. She's a deputy head at Holy Trinity School.
Okay.
For the academics department.
Okay.
And her question is, if you had to choose one value to carry forward in your life, what would it be, knowing that all others cannot be used?
What a question!
Yeah, that's like
give me that. Let me read this. I'm gonna need a minute. What an incredible question.
That's probably one of the deepest ones I feel like we've had.
See how life works out.
Very reflective question.
I was meant to get this question.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So now I need a good answer. So you can cut this and then come back to me when I have something half decent, but give me a second.
Yeah, take time.
If you had a value to carry forward in your life. So essentially she's asking if you can pick one value and you got to leave all the others. Yeah, I think the answer is actually, it can only be one answer actually. And it's love. So love for your neighbor, love for your family, love for yourself. Has to be love.
Yeah. Very nice. Okay. I feel like I would have picked something similar.
Yeah.
I'll just pick I would always say one that's very close to me is just sort of humility. And I've been around a lot of people that in my life before where I didn't see that, and I was always afraid that I would become a type of person that didn't have that. And I think that makes it more important to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great one too. I mean, I think like when you see figures like Trump, like there's no humility there, right? And I think that's, that's how you get people that are so combative with the world because they're combative with themselves. Because so I think that's a maybe better answer than the one I gave. All
right, we'll have Jason leave a question for our next guest.
All right, cool.
Could be whatever you want. Could be fun. Could be as deep as that, or.
Yeah. I actually had a good one, and now I got to take a minute to remember it.
Yeah, take your time.
Okay.
Good.
I think that's a pretty good one.
All right. I'll find out whenever we have our next guest.
Yeah. I'll wrap it up nice and tight for you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Jason, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
This was really fun. This was great. You've got so much knowledge, and I feel like I could sit here, probably talk to you for like 3 hours, and you still have more knowledge to give.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I would love to now extract knowledge from you on my podcast.
Absolutely, So we'll do a bit of like a
role reversal.
situation.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you,
pleasure.
Man. Pleasure. Thank you.